Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. We are here today with Mason Giles
Yeah.
from Comet Backup. Mason is the Chief Technology Officer. Welcome, Mason.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
My pleasure. So today I think we're going to learn all about backups, anything and everything in between, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about Comet Backup for the viewers who don't know who your company is.
Sure. So we make PC backup software.
Okay.
So it's called Comet Backup. We're solely really focused on service providers and IT companies.
Sure.
So we don't sell to end customers at all. So you've got to set up, sign up for Comet, set up your backup server, and then go and get customers to back up to your backup server. It's really
Okay.
neat. It supports cloud storage. It supports encryption. It's really cheap. So come check us out.
And I understand that you actually, did you write the software, or are you one of the engineers, software engineers?
I've been here since day one, moved up the ranks. So yeah, I
There
still
you go.
keep some fingers in the code base.
Excellent, excellent. Well, so often, Mason, we run into clients, especially that and running an IT business, they tell us that they don't need backup. Well, we've got OneDrive. What would you tell those people? What's a good way to dispute that and put that to rest? Why is OneDrive not a good backup solution?
I mean, having something is better than nothing. So if you're trying, then full credit to you. But when you think about the big picture, the threat models, like the whole point of backup is to save you when certain things go wrong. We're talking about hardware failure, theft, fire, natural disasters, but also accidental deletion is a really big one, and of course ransomware. Talking about OneDrive, has got to be the biggest, I guess, compared. It's built into Windows. I mean, it's really kind of a game changer in the market because it's just there, and if everyone's got Office 365, it's just there. So these questions do come up. The thing about OneDrive though is, for a start, not everything gets put in OneDrive. It's we're only looking at your Windows customers mostly. We're not looking at your Mac and Linux customers. We're not looking at everything else that you need to back up. If you've got databases, SQL Server, full disk image backups.
Sure.
VSS integration, and being able to see that across your entire customer base. There is a point where you'll outgrow OneDrive, basically, and we want to be there for when that happens.
Well, I think about, let's take ransomware and OneDrive.
Yep.
To me, OneDrive is more of a sync tool. It replicates and syncs data across different devices. So if you take ransomware and ransomware infects one of the machines running the OneDrive instance, isn't OneDrive just typically going to reproduce and replicate the ransomware to all the other devices?
Yeah, pretty much. What OneDrive does have some amount of rollback capability.
Okay.
But I guess a sufficiently smart ransomware might be able to break through that. I don't know. I'm not here to advertise OneDrive. You should just
Gotcha. Well, and of course, the same holds true for Time Machine. You mentioned Apple. So the Time Machine backups and even Dropbox.
Yeah, the thing about Time Machine specifically is it only backs up to a local hard drive. So you've still got the risks of physical attacks, if your house burns down, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, let's talk about, you mentioned just a second ago, Office 365. So why is it important to back up Office 365 applications, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So recently at Comet, we introduced support for backing up Office 365. And it is kind of a strange concept that, you're expected to back up your files, back up your databases, back up your servers. Sure. But backing up your Office 365 as a cloud product, there's kind of this perception that Microsoft just takes care of it and you don't need to worry about it. And they do take care of it to some degree. There's retention hold and archive mailboxes, but there is a really genuine open question around, is that actually good enough for your company, your requirements? Because retention hold, if by default in Office, if you delete something, it's in the recycle bin or the deleted items folder, you can get it back, or you can, but there are pretty short limits on that. Do you require long-term archives? The biggest risk that I see with Office 365 is making, as an MSP, thinking about making a bad config change to the Office 365 configuration that would delete an entire user account or something like that. But the smoking gun is actually that Microsoft recommends it. You know, if you go look at Microsoft's terms and services, they actually say, please use third-party backups for 365. So it's what you call all care, no responsibility, you know. And so given just the colossal amount of business critical data that sits in your emails and in your calendar, an independent layer of protection is worthwhile. But you're right, though, that the world is changing. More and more data is being stored inside cloud applications instead of on people's PCs. And this question is going to keep coming up, but it is still important that, you know, these backups exist. It's just one way that the backup industry has to evolve.
Well, when you talk backup, Mason, what are the different types of backup and what do they all mean? Can you go over the different types of backup?
Sure. So I'm guessing you're talking about full backups and incremental backups.
Yeah.
And
Differential and.
Yeah. So one of the things that Comet does differently is, you know, the full and incremental backups is a kind of fundamental concept around how things work. Let's focus on the concept of like a SQL Server database backup.
Okay.
You've got your initial, so you pick a new backup provider, you've got your full backup, it uploads the entire database, and then after that, you should just back up the changes since the last version. And that, you know, saves you on storage costs, saves you on bandwidth costs, all of that nice thing. So those are the kind of fundamental concepts that's inescapable. The problem after that, though, is how you manage a really long set of increments. You know, if you've done your full backup last year and you've only been doing incrementals since then, you've got a chain that's, you know, 365 long. When it comes time to restore, suddenly you've got to restore last year's one and replay a ton of increments. And it really slows down your restore in terms of the time it takes to merge those increments back in. It's, you know, all of this wasted download. And
it seems like it could be hard to connect the dots over a certain time period.
Yeah. So you want sufficiently smart software can make sure it's all sorted out. But so the problem with a really long restore chain is a real problem. And so there's lots of different ways to address that. You mentioned differentials before. Differential is when you skip through the chain, you're just going straight back to the last full. So the increment is really big, but you can restore it a little bit faster at the expense of using more storage, so it's not that good. Other ways people try and solve the long chain problem is periodic re-uploads. So, you know, you might do your full backup and then once a month do another full backup. And that's annoyingly slow and it takes a ton of space. Another thing people do is synthetic full images, kind of synthetic roll-up where on the backup server, it will merge those increments physically back into the full image. And that's kind of cool, but you can't do it on cloud storage. You know, if you're using Amazon S3, it's just storage. There's no way you can apply a diff merge kind of process to it without downloading and re-uploading the whole thing. So it doesn't work on cloud storage, it has to break through encryption to work. So it's not that good either. Gotcha. So the long chain problem, it's a real problem for backup software. With our product, Comet, we have a whole different approach. We're using the next generation algorithm. It's called chunking, super cool. And it just solves the problem entirely. Yeah.
Okay. So what is chunking?
Yeah, sure. So chunking is basically our solution to the long chain increment problem. It powers everything we do in Comet. It gives us incremental backups forever with no downside. We're going right back to the basic concepts. You do your full backup upload and then you just upload increments forever. With no downside, it's chain-free increments. So you can get instant restores no matter how old or new your restore target is.
Okay.
No server-side reprocessing, works on cloud storage, works with encryption. The way I like to think about it, and a little bit technical concept, not too bad, but I haven't got it down to a 10-second soundbite yet. So I'm going to try a new analogy on you today, Scott.
Okay.
And so my new analogy today about chunking is imagining you're going on a great big American road trip. You're going from South Carolina all the way to, I don't know, Texas or California or something.
Okay.
And as you're driving along, at every bridge, say, imagine a road trip with a lot of bridges.
Okay.
At every bridge, you stop and take a photo. And that gives you sort of a set of points along your road trip that are sort of fixed points.
Okay.
And then one day you're doing this road trip and there's, a bridge is washed out and you have to detour around through some other city or some other road. And there's different bridges along the way. But at some point you'll get back on the main road and you'll start taking the same photos again. And so we've got bridge to bridge segments that we call chunks. And
okay.
Between these two fixed points, as long as we can always find the same fixed points over and over again, it doesn't matter if you've, grown your database in this area and shrunk it in this area and changed it in this area. Most of the time we're just going to find the same bridge to bridge segments over and over and over again. And when we go to restore, we know that today's version of today's backup is just this segment, this segment, download them all, done. So it's chain free and it's incremental forever, and it's really neat. It supports dynamic, things when things move around. That's my best example. I'm still working on the analogy, but I think I might have made some progress with it.
So I think you answered my next question. My next question was going to be, out of differential, incremental, full backup, what in your opinion is the best type of backup? And I think it's chunking.
Yeah, I also think it's chunking. I will say, I think it's chunking. The best type of backup to have is any kind of backup. I'm here talking about
sure,
and talking about my own product is a side effect of that. But the best type of backup to have. Something else people say is they often talk about 3-2-1 backups. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I think so. Go ahead and explain it to us for the viewers.
So the 3-2-1 kind of soundbite is you're meant to have 3 copies of each file on 2 different storage locations. So, if you've just got it all on the one hard drive, that hard drive dies and you're in trouble. And one off-site, so you're protected against physical problems, theft, fire, earthquake.
Sure.
You're in South Carolina. Are you in a hurricane zone?
Some.
Yeah.
We hadn't had a bad one in a long time, many years. Yeah.
So,
since the 80s, we've had some bad ones, but not a very, very destructive one.
I was on a similar interview with someone from the Pacific Northwest, and we had a big long chat around the wildfires from earlier. But yeah, there's just the physical problems that can happen if you don't have multiple copies of things. So just talking about that 3-2-1 strategy. So if you're hosting a backup server, then you've got the customer's original copy, they're backing up to you, and then you've presumably got some redundancy with your storage, whether that's RAID or if you're using replication. That gets you up to 3 copies, 2 locations offsite. So yeah, just keeping that 3-2-1 in mind is nice.
That's perfect. So when you're talking about storing in the cloud backups, what is the most efficient type of backup to store?
Yeah, so just coming back to this chain versus chunking model again, incremental forever is really important, because if your backup software, if you've got these big long chains, you're doing a full backup. And then if your backup software forces you to do a full re-upload at any point, this causes kind of a bubble in the pipeline. So you've got your full backup, a chain of increments, another full backup, another chain of increments, depending on your retention policy. If I want to keep the last, if I've got legal requirements to keep the last 7 years worth of backups, or maybe it's a little extreme. Maybe I just want to keep the last 6 months worth of backups. But I have to do a full re-upload every 30 days because otherwise my chain gets too long. That's really inefficient from a storage perspective, because you end up having to keep multiple full copies and be paying for all that cloud storage. So incremental forever is really important for storage efficiency. There's lots of other neat things that you can do to improve the storage efficiency. Compression, obviously our backup product uses Z standard compression, which is the cool next generation compression library from Yancom, which is best in class. The neat thing about Z standard, I can just geek out about Z standard for hours, but your basic zip compression, you can, when you right click a file on Windows and you go 7-zip compress or 1-zip compress, You can go fastest compression and it makes it kind of smaller, or you can go strongest compression and it takes ages, but it's a bit smaller. The neat thing about Z, so there's a curve, right? You can go fast and you can go, or you can go hard. And the neat thing about Z standard is the curve is entirely shifted. No matter what, you can tell Z standard to compress harder and it will be faster than zip. Or you can tell it to compress faster and it will get a smaller result than zip. So Z standard is just better than zip all around. So we've been able to integrate that in our software.
Well, I've heard.
Go on.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, something was on my mind. I have heard direct to cloud before. Can you explain that? What that is?
Sure. So cloud storage has got to be the biggest kind of shake up to not just the backup industry, but just I guess, looking back 10 years or 15 years, the IT industry has changed quite a lot, and cloud has been a big part of that. When we started this business, things were a little bit different, but we've really, I guess, made the most of what's available now, and Comet is really well positioned to take advantage of cheap cloud storage. In terms of as a backup software provider, if you're an IT company, if you're an MSP, and you want to start offering a backup service to people, in the past you would have spec'd out a rack server, filled it up with 1 terabyte drives, put them in a RAID, and then started selling space on it. And you can still do that today, and the economics are a bit better once you start using bigger drives, your 8, 10, 12, 16 terabyte drives, depending on how big an MSP you are. You can run Comet on a Windows 10 box in your garage if you want. But provisioning a great big server, there's a big capital outlay. You need to buy all these drives. Whereas on cloud storage, Backblaze B2 and Wasabi, we've got great integrations with these guys for $5 per terabyte per month, and it's just so cheap. It's a no-brainer, really. And so cloud backup storage, huge change in the industry, just completely changes how you might want to sell and operate a backup service. And so with Comet, we support cloud backup storage. There's a few different ways to do it in Comet. So Comet is a client server backup software. So you operate a Comet server, you take the Comet client agent, install it on all your customer devices. That's how it works. And then there's 2 options for how that data can actually flow. The traditional way is that the Comet client would transfer the data to your Comet server, and then your Comet server would store it on a local RAID array or a SAN or something. But so the first way we integrated cloud storage was that the Comet server would just forward the data onto cloud storage, which is neat because it's fully hidden. The customer has no idea that you're using cloud storage or not. You can be fully, this is the ITBOG backup service, and the customer's got no idea what's actually behind it. Because they're using the cheapest cloud storage in the world. So it's fully hidden, but it is an extra hop, that data is going through 2 steps. And so there's an extra hop, which adds latency, there's bandwidth costs because you're double handling the data. So the other way we can do it is direct to cloud. You just go in, input the cloud details in the customer's settings, and then the customer's data will just go direct to cloud, which is faster, no extra hop, no extra bandwidth costs. If you're using something like Wasabi or Backblaze B2 as a storage backend, inside the desktop app, there's a ton of branding options in Comet. So you can hide and show all sorts of things. You can rename, relabel, white label things. So you can hide that you're using cloud storage in the app. But as long as it's going direct to cloud, we can never really hide it in the firewall. If someone looks at their Unify logs or their MikroTik logs or something,
the IP address, and
it's going to be there. The domain name's going to show up, so it's never fully hidden. And safety becomes more complicated as well, because as an IT company, if you're selling this backup service to a couple hundred customers, every customer needs separate access keys, separate credentials. And when in the traditional model where Comet backs up to a Comet server, Comet server's got its own username and password system. But when they're going direct to cloud, well, you need separate Backblaze and Wasabi keys for every single customer. And so allocating those keys, managing them, freeing them when the customer leaves, that kind of thing. So management's a bit more complicated. I keep talking about Backblaze and Wasabi because Comet has great support for automatically managing direct to cloud access keys. But Yeah,
Well,
so that's
but
kind
with
of
Comet, the backups can go anywhere, correct?
yeah, just completely anywhere. It's a really flexible system.
So I hear a lot about Amazon AWS buckets and their cold storage. Can you kind of explain what exactly is cold storage? What is everybody referring to when they say cold storage?
Sure. So cold storage, I think, differs from what you'd consider hot storage, in that
Okay.
cold storage is not immediately accessible. It's storage in the sense that you've taken all your data, you've burned it onto a Blu-ray, you've shipped it on a truck to a warehouse out of state.
Okay.
And so it's really cheap storage because it's just sitting in a warehouse somewhere. But wow, is it slow to access. If you need something back, you're going to have to arrange a courier. And
So the rent is cheap. It's
the
cheap
rent is
rent.
cheap. Rent is really cheap, closer to $2 per terabyte per month. But wow, if you want something back, it's expensive and it's slow. So it's good for that kind of long-term archive that you might not want to get anything back from. And if you do want something back, you're prepared to wait 48 hours at least for that kind of retrieval. AWS recently introduced something called Glacier Expedited Access, which is a really good middle ground in that it's somewhat cheaper. So it's still really cheap, something like $4 per terabyte per month. And it's still pretty snappy to get data back when you need it. So that's a really good compromise.
Well, I guess that's why the rent is cheap then. So on the super cold storage.
On the super cold
Dial
storage.
up speeds to get it back, right?
Yeah, or worse. Yeah, seriously, there's explicitly a time delay. You have to request something back, and then maybe 48 hours your request will be fulfilled.
Wow.
So not even instant. Yeah, Wasabi and Backblaze are fascinating in terms of how they've managed to hit a really competitive price point while still being that sort of instant download.
Well, I want to change subjects a little bit. Let's talk about disk image backups versus like a file folder style backup.
Yep.
Would you say that file folder is just as efficient? Or would you say that they all have their, I would personally say that they have their uses. Each one has its own case point, use point. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'd agree. They both got the uses. I guess the big concept is, are you really thinking about a disaster recovery situation, or are you talking about, single file, the receptionist wants her Excel document back kind of thing. And when you take a full disk image backup, it's more comprehensive. There's no gaps. You've definitely backed up everything. Takes a bit longer because there's more data involved, requires more storage space because there's more data involved. Whereas, file and folder is probably a little faster to back up, probably smaller storage requirements. There's a risk that you didn't pick the right folders, unless you're, backing up all of C drive, in which case you may as well do a disk image backup. So Comet supports both. We can skip over free space in a disk image, so they're similarly efficient. In the past, I would have said something about restore options, your most common restore method. Are you just restoring a single file, or do you expect to restore an entire disk image? But we've just recently made it easier to restore single files out of a disk image backup. So that's really, it kind of makes a disk image backup almost like the thing to do.
And if I'm not mistaken, a file image, based on what you said with the bridges and the gaps, a file image would not use chunking, would it?
We actually use chunking for everything. Yeah.
Okay. I got you.
In fact, if you do disk image backup with Comet and a file level backup with Comet, and there's a great big file, we're going to find the same bridges no matter how we read that file, if we're reading it through the disk or through the file. So there'll be some amount of deduplication that happens between a disk image backup and a file backup on the same thing. The only other thing I would say is that, when you're doing a disk image backup or a file level backup, you're not getting the programs involved. So the other thing that we do is we have a lot of application specific integrations with SQL Server, MySQL, Exchange Server, and so on, that can talk to the database, make sure it's in a safe state for backup and give you that higher level of consistency, a higher level of integration than just backing up the files from disks. Because if you just back up, SQL Server's files out from under it, and then later on you are restoring to that state, SQL Server might have been in the middle of a transaction. It's going to have to, repair its database or whatever. It's going to slow down the startup, and so yeah.
Okay. Well, did you work for a backup company prior to creating the software?
Yeah, I did. So I've got quite a bit of experience in the backup industry now. I started out working at an MSP, working on supporting the backup software that they were using at the time, and it was a little bit frustrating because we see all these pain points using other people's backup software, and then at some point we sort of struck out and started developing our own. And so yeah, it's just know a lot about the pain points of other software on the market. And can we just talk about Log4j for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so with Log4j, I heard the news, and it's a big serious incident for a lot of people.
Sure.
Really important. It could be the end of your company if you don't, stop, patch the leak before someone else gets in.
Sure.
But my heart didn't stop, and I didn't miss a beat, because I knew we didn't have a single piece of Java anywhere in our stack. Then what a relief. So no Java, no Log4j. So it's not my first run-in with Java. Java's obviously super popular, and a lot of applications use it. Used many Java-based backup products in the past, and without naming any names, always had a lot of frustrations having to set, XMX max on the command line arguments, tweak the heap size, started through GC pauses. Always uses way more memory than you think it should. So one of the things we did with Comet is it's all Go and C++. It's all fully native code, so it's fantastic. It's super fast, efficient, and lightweight. Yeah, and just the other thing is being able to take chunking from the abstract kind of research concept that it really was, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and being able to commercialize it as a real product. So using these other products in the market and struggling with these long chain problems, and doing full re-uploads with your backup software. There's got to be a better way, because full re-uploads on your chain are a constant drain on costs. Managing a broken or corrupted chain is just a nightmare. Full re-uploads, bandwidth costs. Down here in New Zealand, internet's pretty good. You can get gigabit fiber to the home pretty cheaply, but it was not always like that. And we spent a long time on, 56K in DSL, and the cost of bandwidth uploads. And if your backup software makes you do a full upload every 30 days or something, that's just so frustrating from a limited internet point of view. So, yeah, being able to do incremental forever is just phenomenal. And so we've got this chunking algorithm, and we really productized it, shipped it, got a nice, fast, efficient, lightweight client, disk image support. And so the market has really played that out, and I think seen the benefits of what we're doing.
Well, let's go back to you working for another company prior to this. What were some pain points that you saw in dealing with the backup systems prior to coming on to Comet that you said, hey, I want to go ahead and I want to create something totally different that is not plagued with these problems? What were those problems that you saw?
Yeah, well, I just having to do full re-uploads, having to manage a chain, having to deal with Java applications, and
so there's got to be an easier way.
Yeah, there's just got to be an easier way.
Sure.
Another thing I would say is possibly API. I don't know if you have too many programmers come on your streams, but being able to, if you're a programmer, or if you can hire a programmer, being able to deeply integrate and automate things is something else that we took as a top priority for Comet. So every single feature in the user interface can also be done via the API, and we've seen some pretty fantastic deep integrations with like e-commerce software and RMMs and things like that.
All right. Well, we've got a question. If you don't mind, I'll ask a question from the audience about deduplication in Comet. Does it dedupe between customers and different computers, or just for each computer that is backed up?
So it's actually optional. You can do either.
Okay.
All mechanism, no policy. So there's another phrase. So with Comet, so we do deduplication, and deduplication is fantastic. Everyone loves deduplication. You only have to store things once. And Comet is very good at it because we deduplicate each chunk. And so, if you found the same part of a file on multiple files, if you've got a document on your desktop, you email it to someone, it shows up in your Outlook PST, back up your Outlook PST. Wow, we only have to store it once. It's great. And it goes beyond that. Deduplication in Comet is mandatory because, it's part of chunking. It's just how Comet works. It's always on. We rely on it pretty heavily for the big concept is like today's backup deduplicated against yesterday's backup. We just find the same chunks, only store them once. Did you move files around, rename them? Doesn't matter. Dedupe will find them and only store them once. So the question here was, do we deduplicate at a per PC level or a per user account level? And the answer is, it's up to you. You can create a user account in Comet and put as many physical PCs as you want into it, and they'll all share a storage vault as our unit of deduplication, and they'll all deduplicate together. So yeah, you can deduplicate across PCs. I would not recommend doing it across an entire customer base though, because there's some security issues around figuring out other people's data based on what deduplicates more quickly. So deduplicating I would keep it in a single trust domain is the term that we use for it. Customers should be trusted to share that access to deduplicated data. But yeah, otherwise you can do it per PC, per customer, per company, per office, per organization, do whatever you want. It's very flexible.
Well, you mentioned just a minute ago backup security from a security perspective. We hear a lot of other backup platforms that talk about your data being encrypted at rest and in transit. I know Comet does that, but I think a lot of them say that. But is that really the case with a lot of these backup vendors, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I'm a big believer in encryption, and it's pretty easy to just slap AES on something and say, oh yeah, it's encrypted. But who's got the keys? Who can actually decrypt it? What's the actual threat model that encryption is trying to secure against? And if you've got something like a backup software that has synthetic full support, if you've got a full image, a lot of increments, another full image, you want to merge an increment back into the original full image. That kind of processing requires quite deep data access. It needs to break through the encryption. So suddenly the encryption key has to be shared with whatever's doing the synthetic full merging. And it's really tough, especially if you're dealing with cheap cloud storage. Backblaze and Wasabi, I keep coming back to because they're publicly traded. They've both IPO'd now. They're both very reliable providers. But we deal internationally, and there's a lot of cloud storage providers that you can use. There's a great concept called S3 compatible. So a lot of cloud storage providers will just be S3 compatible, and Comet can talk to an S3 compatible cloud storage provider. So in the US, you're spoiled for choice. There's hundreds of cloud storage providers, but if you're in Estonia or Brazil or something, and for better performance you want lower latency, use a local storage provider. Who knows what kind of data center they're running on? Is it just someone's Windows 10 PC in a garage running some open source S3 compatible?
Sure.
You just don't know. So having that encryption on cloud storage is super important, especially when you are trusting some cloud storage provider with your customers' data. Being able to say that the encryption, not just that AES is involved somewhere and that there's encryption key involved somewhere, but actually genuinely believing that there's no way anyone else could get access to this data. So Comet guarantees this. We encrypt every single chunk individually, client side, before it touches the Comet server, let alone before it reaches the storage. So it's fully client-side encryption. Client-side encryption is automatic and it's mandatory. We've got this fantastic, what's called a zero knowledge ratchet, which is like, the mechanical thing that can only turn one way. And it gives us a lot of cool security properties. And doing client-side encryption helps with compliance, helps with GDPR, HIPAA, things like that. So I'd say Comet is, we've gone all in on encryption, but it's seamless, it's automatic, it's magic, it just works. One of the fascinating things about backup, traditionally, as a algorithm designer for encryption systems, there's this concept that if you generate an encryption key, it should never leave the machine it's generated on. But with Comet, that's a little bit different because we're doing client-side encryption, all these PCs that it's a backup software. The point of backup software is to be able to get your data back when the whole PC gets destroyed or lost, stolen. And so we do have to think very carefully about where is the encryption key stored, where is it generated, who has access to the encryption key. And we're trying to make trade-offs between, we're dealing pretty much with IT service providers and MSPs only, but we're trying to cover quite a broad range of companies within that. And so, some MSPs are very hands-on. They'll have access to everything, all the encryption keys, and some will just, chuck the installer on download.com or whatever and let the customers go nuts. So
right.
Yeah, but just being able to meet all the extremes with our software and being able to provide genuinely good client-side encryption security and things like that. Sorry, I've kind of rambled on a bit.
No, you're great. You're great. So, you talked about those restores. How often, in your opinion, should the MSP or the backup, the person managing the backup, be testing those restores? Because you said that, we back up because we hope that we don't need to, but one day we might need to restore that backup. How often should we be testing it?
Yeah, there's a saying that, well, I've been falling back to sayings quite a lot today. There's a saying that if you haven't tested your backup, then you just don't have one. It's about your confidence and preparedness. Like, when the day comes, is everything going to work well? In my role now as CTO, I often give talks and presentations and interviews like this, and there's something that I've come to think that public speaking is a skill that you can learn. The best cure for public speaking anxiety is preparation. This interview is a well-oiled process. It's going smoothly. Full credit to you as well. And disaster recovery is the same. There should be no surprises. It should be a well-oiled process. It should go smoothly. You shouldn't suddenly realize that, oh no, my settings, I didn't tick the box to include that new drive letter or that new server or container or service or
sure.
Perish the thought, my Comet server's gone down and I can't log into Comet because I can't restore Comet from inside itself, something like that. Solutions for that, but you shouldn't be learning something new on the day. I'm not going to say any kind of hard numbers like I should run one every day or run one every week or anything prescriptive, because it's mostly about your confidence level and having a playbook that when new services and new applications, new data comes on board, that you've got a process to make sure that it's protected and that you've done it a couple of times, the process, you're going to be confident when the time comes.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. What should IT professionals be looking for in not just Comet, but any backup solution that they want to implement for their clients and customers? What are some key points that you would encourage everyone to look for in a backup solution?
Yeah. First thing I would say is just get something. Something is better than nothing, no matter what it is. Yeah. My personal bugbears are getting these three things all together, and that is incremental forever, encrypted on cloud storage, incremental forever, encrypted on cloud storage. It's common to have one or two. It's common for a product to offer three, but not be able to use three all at the same time. I've been harping on about, the traditional full and incremental with long delta chains, and that means either full up re-uploads, which is a waste of bandwidth, or synthetic full, which, that kind of merging process breaks through encryption and it doesn't work on cloud storage. So being able to do incremental forever, encrypted on cloud storage all at the same time, I think really sets a backup product apart from the others. You'll find Comet can do it. You'll find a couple others can do it, but it's actually kind of rare still, which is,
Great,
that
great.
would be my suggestion.
Well, Mason, we are coming up on the time. What else would you like to share as some last parting ideas about backups or anything?
Yeah, I think, do you want me to just go philosophical on you for a minute?
Sure.
Working at the old backup company and working at MSPs and things like that, and before we got to where we are now, which is just a pure software provider. We don't offer backups ourselves. We just making this software for IT companies to
Sure.
take and make a name for themselves with. But I remember, you know, taking phone calls from customers, and a customer would call up and say, "Hey, I've lost all my emails. Can you get them back?" And I said, "Yeah, go look through the settings," and the emails just weren't there. And, you know, it's these heartbreaking calls and moments that you think, you know, how do I tell this old man, you know, that he's been paying us all this time and we just don't have his data? And it's gut wrenching.
It is.
It's the kind of call you never forget, and it's really made me think that, you know, backup, it's so critical for so many people. There's all these stats thrown around, like if you lose all your data, you'll go out of business in a month or 2 months. So I forget what the number is, but our whole digital lives are on these things. You know, protecting them is super important. My mother-in-law lost all her, you know, kids' photos when, you know, she broke her phone because they weren't backed up. It's just so important. And
I can imagine breaking the news as an IT provider to your client. Luckily, I have not had to break that news, but I can imagine it's much like a doctor telling a family member, we did all we could do and we couldn't save your family member. I mean, it's just, it's not a position I want to be in.
That's right. Well, you tell these scary stories and it makes it pretty easy to sell back up to your customers, at least. So that's the silver lining. So yeah, if anyone on this stream wants to check out Comet Backup, come along to cometbackup.com.
All right. Sounds great. Well, Mason, I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to do this. I believe your day is just starting. It's almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon for us over here. So I really appreciate you starting your day out with IT Business Owners Group.
Thanks. Hey, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. We'll have to do it again sometime. Thank you, Mason. Have a good one. All right. Bye-bye.